She had outlived 37 diplomatic envoys, 2 civil wars, and an asteroid that took out half a moon. Elias Thorne had been on Ethelgard's station for 11 hours before he managed to do something none of them ever had. He made her blush. The crystalline reception hall was exactly as the briefing files described, and nothing like them at all. Every surface caught the light and broke it apart, sent it sprawling across the floor in colors that didn't have names in any human language. The ceiling arched high enough to make a cathedral feel modest. The air carried a faint mineral charge, like the moment before lightning, except the lightning never came. Elias walked the central approach at the prescribed pace, measured, deliberate, each step announced by the hollow resonance of polished obsidian beneath his boots. And he kept his eyes forward. He kept his expression neutral. He mentally rehearsed for the 14th time that morning the formal greeting that Protocol Division had spent 6 weeks constructing. 12 sentences, 3 subordinate clauses acknowledging Valia's reign. A careful linguistic bridge between Terran Standard and High Etheric that had taken a team of xenolinguists 11 days to approve. He had it memorized cold. The dais at the far end of the hall rose in 3 wide tiers, and on the highest stood Empress Valia. 300 years old, the files said, immortal by biology, absolute by law, untouchable by centuries of unbroken precedent. The files had also included photographs. The photographs had been insufficient. She was tall, the way a still lake is tall. That sense of depth before you account for distance. Her skin held a faint luminescence beneath the surface, like something patient living just below the light. Her attendants stood in perfect formation along both flanks, motionless, their formal silks pressed into geometry. The royal herald stepped forward, began the credential announcement in High Etheric, each title landing with the weight of ritual. Elias waited, heard his name, took the half-step forward that protocol required, opened his mouth, and the 12 sentences were simply gone. What came out instead was quiet, almost private, the voice of a man who had stopped pretending and hadn't quite caught up to that decision yet. "Your Imperial Majesty," he said, "you are extraordinarily beautiful." The silence that followed was architectural. It had walls. It had weight. And then Empress Valia, 37th of her dynasty, survivor of wars and centuries and the cold mathematics of outliving everyone she had ever known, flushed. Not metaphorically. Her skin responded the way her species' skin responded to involuntary emotion. A slow, unmistakable bloom of bioluminescent color moving from her jaw to her temples, gold shifting into deep violet, bright as something burning. The court didn't breathe. She straightened. Her voice, when it came, was composed in the way that required effort to be composed. "Clear the hall. Every attendant, every advisor, every herald and guard, gone in 60 seconds. The crystalline room emptied around Elias like a tide pulling back from a single stone. He stood there alone, waited, heard his own heartbeat for the first time since entering. And it turned out the walk back to the Terran embassy was the longest 11 minutes of his diplomatic career. Not because anything was said to him, but because nothing was. Director Vance met him at the entrance with the expression of a person already composing the incident report. "Deportation?" Elias asked. Vance looked at the message on her screen, then at Elias, then at the screen again. "The Empress has bypassed the full diplomatic scheduling queue." A pause that seemed to need a moment to believe itself. "You're invited to a private dinner. Tonight. Her personal quarters." Elias said nothing. "Whatever you did in that hall," Vance said slowly, "you are never, under any circumstances, to explain it to me." Her private quarters were nothing like the reception hall. No performance of grandeur here. The ceilings were lower, and the lighting was warm and amber. Something close to candlelight filtered through pale stone. A table had been set near a wide viewport. 2 chairs, 2 settings, no attendance. Outside the glass, Ethelgard's twin moons hung in the dark like they were listening. Valia was already seated when he arrived. No herald announced him. No one bowed. She simply looked up, and for a moment the bioluminescence beneath her skin shifted, barely just a flicker of gold, before she controlled it. She was, he realized, as unnerved as he was. She just had 300 years of practice hiding it. The meal was informal in a way that felt deliberate, almost careful, like she'd had to instruct staff on what informal even looked like. There were dishes he didn't recognize and one that smelled improbably like rosemary. He didn't ask. He ate. She watched him the way someone watches a thing they're trying to memorize before it disappears. It was somewhere between the second and third course that she told him. Not dramatically. That was the part that stayed with him. She said it the way people say the truest things, quietly without preamble, looking at the viewport instead of at him. "I have done this before," Valia said. "Allowed proximity, and I have watched every one of them age. Every one." A pause. The grief does not become smaller with practice. It accumulates. Elias set down his fork. "I am telling you this," she continued, "so that you understand what I am not able to offer you." She turned then, looked at him directly. Her expression was composed and devastatingly honest. The face of someone who had already decided to say goodbye before hello had finished. Elias held her gaze for a long moment. Truth is, the polished diplomatic response was right there. The graceful exit. The professionally worded acknowledgement of her concern. He could have stood, thanked her for her candor, and preserved his career with both hands. He pushed his chair back instead, stood, crossed the small distance between them, unhurried, deliberate, and crouched to her eye level, close enough that the ambient warmth of her bioluminescence was something he could feel against his face. "I heard you," he said. "I'm still here." The gold beneath her skin bloomed slow and unguarded. Violet followed. She looked at him like a person encountering a calculation that refuses to resolve. Like the variable keeps returning the wrong answer, and the math is somehow more honest for it. When he kissed her, she stilled for exactly one breath. Then her hand came up and settled against his jaw, careful and certain at once, and she kissed him back like someone who had decided, after a very long time, to stop being careful. They gave him 3 months of experimental cellular therapy. The Royal Medical Team was thorough, expensive, and deeply unhappy about the precedent. Elias let them work. He signed the forms. He endured the treatments with the patience of a man who understood exactly what he was buying. The decree naming him royal consort came on a Tuesday. Valia delivered it without ceremony, handed him the document across the breakfast table, already on to the next page of her briefings. He found that more romantic than any reception hall. 5 years later, they stood together on the private terrace of the capital residence as the city spread out below them, lit gold in the long evening. His hair had silver at the temples now. She looked the same as the day he'd walked toward her dais with 12 sentences he never used. She noticed him looking. "You're doing the math again," she said. "I always do the math," he admitted. Her hand found his on the railing. Her fingers settled between his, warm, unhurried, like a thing that had always belonged there and had finally stopped pretending otherwise. "So do I," she said quietly. Below them, the city moved through its evening. Above them, Ethelgard's twin moons were rising again, patient as ever. He held her hand and didn't let go.